Hello, everybody. Cloud is one of the most important skills to acquire today, irrespective of what you are doing in the IT industry. Whether you are a tester, a business analyst, a programmer, or an architect, irrespective of the role you are doing, irrespective of the task you are working on, machine learning, or even data engineering, whatever you're doing, cloud is one of the most essential skills to have today. And in this session, we are going to talk about Google Cloud. Google Cloud is one of the most popular cloud platforms. In fact, it's third in the list of cloud platforms in terms of popularity today. And to discuss about Google Cloud, we have GK, Sathish, and Amit in the call with us today. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, Ranga. Thank you for having us.
Yep.
Amit is going to host us today, and he's going to take us through the entire discussion things. And the interesting thing for you to understand, to know is like all of us are all of us have at least a couple of Google certifications active, and at some point in time we had more certifications active. So the things which you would be hearing in here are based out of our experience of working with Google Cloud and doing multiple certifications with Google Cloud.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ranga, for that quick introduction. So, to begin with, if I'm a new learner and want to start kind of embarking on the journey of cloud, so I have this question in my mind, right? What is cloud and like why cloud? I have everything currently there in my software deployment development toolkit, and this is something new. So why should I learn this? So if for a new learner, how can you summarize or how can you explain them? So not sure if Satish you want to go first.
Sure, I can. The reason why you want to do that is because the world wants it, right? I think Gartner has a prediction that about 90 or 95% of enterprises and companies are going to move to the public cloud by about 2025, which means that essentially every company is going to be there, right? It's a basic demand today as much as food, water, and internet, right? And therefore, contributing to that and being a part of this also means that you get to grow your career. Any kind of industry you take, retail, healthcare, transport, travel, food delivery, right? Every one of them has a backend in the cloud that supports all their operations. And therefore, it's just a reality today. Everything is dependent on it, and therefore you can also definitely be a part of it for multiple reasons, right? One, to make an impact, and of course to grow your own career too. GK.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on all aspects, Satish. You have pretty much covered everything. Yeah, so obviously, I think most of us heard the Andy Jesse's speech. Enterprise-wise, there is still a lot of scope for companies to go to cloud. Their compute is still, I think, in less than 10%. In cloud. So there's a long way for all the companies to go to cloud. And there are multiple clouds. We're not going to talk about that here yet. But so, like Satish said, in every aspect of compute, like either it is serverless or Kubernetes, or if you're using direct VMs, and we have seen in enterprises also when they are migrating, they have looked at if they shut down the data centers as it is and then move to cloud, they still have a lot of cost savings on cloud. And not only that, right, and especially for the startups, obviously it's easy to start on cloud, to shed their stuff easily on cloud when compared to setting up everything on the data center. And then right now, with all the machine learning and everything that is happening, if you want to create a chatbot or anything, it's just a click away in cloud when compared to setting the whole thing from scratch, because the SaaS solutions and the PaaS solutions are readily available in most of the cloud service providers these days. So there are a host of reasons for people to move to cloud. And then obviously for people who want to learn cloud, obviously the companies are moving to cloud. So there's no, I don't think the data centers are going to be there in many companies down the lane. There are going to be some data centers still because of certain data restrictions that are based on the company, right? Like the military, or the company, if it's there on the defense sector, they might have some data centers. But ultimately, I think everybody should learn cloud, and cloud, like Ranga keeps saying, everywhere in LinkedIn, that cloud is here to stay. So that's from me. Over to you, Ranga.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, GK and Satish. I think you summarized it perfectly. Cloud, all enterprises are shifting towards the cloud, and I mean, it has tremendous value to startups as well, right? So if I'm starting up today I can deploy my data center. I mean, earlier, if want to have a data center in New York and Sydney, for example, right? I mean, look at the amount of effort which is involved. And today, if I'm a startup, I can have my application deployed to multiple places around the world with a click of the button. I mean, this is a flexibility which we rarely had before. I mean, I don't think it was even possible before without a lot of effort. So yeah, enterprises, startups, everybody has a lot of value in the cloud, and yeah, I think it's definitely imperative that if you are in the IT world today, you have to learn the cloud.
Just one
Right.
additional thing I'd like to add is how this whole pandemic has also changed the entire landscape. We were all getting into the cloud, in increasing ways. But in the recent past, there's been a substantial, in fact, a staggering increase in how companies have started to adopt and understand the reason to move to the cloud. Right? It's kind of similar to how people have just moved to video conferencing more than any kind of direct meetings. And you can see that in the numbers. Some numbers, I think, from the company Statista, it shows almost like a vertical rise in the adoption of cloud in general, right? So clearly there is value. This is not something that people are just trying to push hard. It's not just a marketing pitch, but there is a reality on the ground. And that's the reason why we should all be looking at, just understanding the cloud, learning the cloud, and being a part of it.
That's awesome. So, if kind of summarizing what the gist of what all of you said, right? It's enterprises are moving at a rapid pace in cloud, and there's a lot of value for the enterprises, kind of reducing the time to market. There are ready-made solutions available in the cloud, which they can just click and deploy, right? And plus, the impact of pandemic has kind of rapidly
Yeah.
increased the adoption of cloud pretty much. Yeah, I kind of agree with all of you. So when you say moving to cloud, so do you still foresee on-premise solutions still staying, or like what percentage of IT spending would be divided in on-premise to cloud-based solutions?
Should I go first again?
Yes, it is.
So, see, the thing is, invariably, there are going to be certain restrictions on the movement of everything to the cloud. It is just not going to happen, right? So, 100% real estate on the cloud is not going to be reasonable for a large number of big companies, especially the enterprises that work in, say, banking or finance, or some of the, for example, like government and military and all that is not going to go there, right? So, I would expect, I don't have a number, I'm just throwing a random number out there, would be in the range of about 5 to 10%, right? Maybe in the single digits. In the next about 5, 6 years is what I'm talking about. Right now, of course, it's a much larger number, but we should be seeing more and more people adopting the public cloud and less having their own private cloud. But it's not going to completely eliminate it, because there are certain rules, restrictions, there are certain secrets that people would be extremely worried to put on the cloud. If you look at it, though, maybe in many cases the public cloud is safer than even having their own private data centers. But people have some kind of an, even if it's a false assurance, at least they have an assurance that there is a building that we own, nobody can enter. Of course, not all the attackers are coming in through the front door, right? They're coming through the network. But even then, there is some kind of assurance that if something goes wrong, they can pull the plug and maybe save themselves temporarily. So, for reasons of regulation, there is going to continue to be private cloud for a long time, but it's just going to be lesser and lesser, and it's going to be so small that it's not going to make a significant impact on everything else, right? It's going to be something like those old languages that still exist. There are people still programming in it, but it is not going to be what is going to drive the predominant um, set of businesses and software on the cloud in general, private or public.
Right, right. GK, your thoughts?
Yeah, so again, Satish hit the nail. So basically, what I see is less percentage of compute will be on cloud on premise in future. And the heartening thing to see is also, a lot of defense sector is also going into, Gov Cloud of AWS, where they have specific data centers for them in the government sector of USA. So which is good. But I think in the transition period of going into cloud enterprises, a lot of times, like Satish said, they have these legacy languages, and also the database has been the biggest problem, right? For example, companies use Oracle database even now, and Oracle have their own monopolized way of using OCI, so they wouldn't allow you to create the enterprise, the whole rack per se, or the whole data guard solution in AWS or Azure. So what they do is, they just keep that on-prem and then somehow use connectivity from on-prem to AWS through for using Oracle database. So slowly that will also go away. But the third thing is mostly, like Satish said, the PCI zones are very private zones, like payment card, like credit card information and all this
Right,
stuff.
right,
Companies would not be that. At least now, the level of confidence is not yet there to go into public cloud, any public cloud. And then the software defined networks, they still have some latency issues by using public cloud, for using public cloud. So they would still stay in on-prem because of a lot of latency issues, because nobody like AWS, or even for that matter GCP or Azure, will not give you a guaranteed latency in their agreement. So there are certain reasons of that sort that people will stick to, at least enterprises will stick to their data centers. And
yeah,
obviously it is basically, it depends on what kind of software stack they have. And in startups, I think they might go 100%, but yeah, enterprises
right.
still will use data centers.
So even for fintech, you mean, because PCI and all comes in
Correct.
picture when
Yeah,
fintech.
yeah.
Okay,
And we have seen, right? I mean, recently the Capital One hacks, or the latest hacks that keep happening, the S3 is getting exposed and they're taking up information. These things will still make a lot of paranoia in the fintech. And then they will have that data at rest, especially on data centers, and the main PCI stuff in the data centers is what I believe, for at least some time. I don't know
right.
the
That's
time.
where the right.
Yeah,
So that's where the hybrid cloud comes into the picture. The things that cannot
yeah,
move on the cloud, like as you said, PCI kind of things would be
yeah.
on premise, but everything else kind of will be in the cloud, and they both
Correct.
can talk to each other without any problems.
Correct.
Right.
Just to add on to that, right? I mean, though GCP and Azure and all these clouds have PCI DSS certification done, there are
Yes,
certain rules that they have to follow as part of their data center, which they have done, but still the confidence is low. Like Satish said, the plug and I mean, you can pull the plug easily on your data center. So they want to, like, your your system admins want to have that control. Whenever things go wrong, it's easier to pull the plug.
absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, if the government is moving to cloud, then the enterprises have no kind of excuse to not move to cloud. Right.
Yeah.
Ranga,
One
what I got?
additional
Yeah,
point I would say that is, there was a case of, I think, Dropbox as a company who evaluated the costs of the cloud and said, it's probably, and I think they were on AWS before or something, public cloud, and they said we're going to go back and run our own private cloud because the numbers just work that way for us. And I think that is going to happen once or twice. But the economies of scale on the public cloud seem to be much higher, right? And I think these will be the exceptions where it happens a few times, but even that might then move on to the public cloud. So we kind of have to see what's going to happen in the next few years. But I would, if you're going to put your money somewhere, I'd put it more in the public cloud than on private enterprise cloud.
absolutely. Ranga, where is your money?
Only at one place in my pocket.
Okay, that's good.
I
Data
mean,
center.
yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? So almost all enterprises have huge value, and we only see adoption of cloud going even faster in the next few years. I mean, as Satish and GK are saying, it's basically, I mean, I think 90% in 5 years. I think that's a good estimate, right? So 90% of the workloads to be running in cloud in 90%. I think, yeah, that's probably, yeah, where we are looking at right now. Given, I mean, we have to again take a lot of predictions with a pinch of salt, because we know what IBM said in 1980s, right? There is no world for personal computers. And today, the personal computers are everywhere. So predictions are difficult to make, but I agree. I mean, it's, if we look at what we can see today, there's no. I mean, cloud is going to like almost enterprise. All enterprises would be using cloud, and even
Wow.
government.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Like 90% is a huge opportunity for any new learner at this point of time, kind of entering the market. If you are new, just passing out of college, if you are worried, where you'll get job, you'll not get job, man, blindly just go in cloud. As we kind of discussed, enterprises are going all out. So typically, like, there are certain myths around cloud, right? People have in mind, right? So can I move my on-premise kind of deployment to cloud, or will there be any downtime around it? So how can I work around it? So what do you have to say um, on this, like moving from on-premise to cloud? Is it how easy or how difficult it is? Probably GK, if you can start now.
All right. So yeah, it's a sort of a tough question because it depends on your workloads. If it is an enterprise company, obviously it will be very difficult to move. They have like 5-year plan, to move, or less than that.
Right.
Depends on the company, because one legacy systems, and then they come up with a strategy of first lift and shift, where they'll try to lift the whole thing, and they'll have a strategy of shutting down the data centers slowly, like phasing out one by one. So there is a huge planning around it. It's not that easy in enterprise. And because one, to think about how to move the workloads to any specific cloud, and before even that, they will have to first zero on one specific cloud. And most of the enterprises, they will try to go with one cloud first. They will not try to go with all three clouds at a time. Like for example, Walmart have chosen Azure because they have a bad thing with Amazon. Obviously, they don't want to have Amazon as their competitors. So, and there are a lot of companies like that who will go with, like, 90% of the workloads will be in one cloud. So first, choosing the cloud is the most important thing for them. And then how to move the workloads. So there'll be like massive amounts of business units like Wells Fargo or any such huge
Right.
companies. So for them, they have to first understand how much of these workloads can go to cloud, how are we going to do lift and shift strategy, and how are we going to set up the whole governance practices in cloud. you know so those are some of the challenges, not myths I would say, but challenges that they would have to face. And then slowly they'll figure it out. Once you put the gun to the manager and tell him to move or her to move to the cloud, they'll figure out a way to move to the cloud. So that's one. And the second thing is, like, if the workload is smaller, startup companies, I don't think there'll be any issues moving to cloud if they have a very small e-commerce or some sort of monolith application. Even if it is monolith, it's okay to move to cloud. That's my experience. Once you move to cloud, you can figure out how do you want to break them into microservices, and then whether you want to use PaaS, Kubernetes, or whatever service that you want to use in cloud. But I would say most of the time is will go actually into figuring out the things, and then understanding and getting your team trained to learn cloud. I mean, that's the most important challenge for an enterprise, is getting all those resources to
Yeah.
learn cloud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one interesting point you said, that first they would have to identify one cloud that they will go ahead
Yeah.
with. Now, for example, I choose to go ahead with Google Cloud, and
Yeah.
then I decide, for example, I want to use another cloud because some of the services that they offer probably kind of suit my current
Yes.
requirement for this specific project. Now,
Yeah.
am I tied up to this now, or can I shift like partial workloads to another cloud while having this as my Google Cloud as my primary workload?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, based out of my experience, the reason why they would go with one cloud is that majority of the time they spend their effort and time in moving their compute into that cloud. So let's say there are three clouds. Let's talk about AWS, GCP, and Azure, right?
Yep.
Um, Company A, what they would do is they will evaluate the current software stack. Let's say their software stack is heavily on Microsoft, and if Microsoft is giving them good deals, and obviously when
Yes.
you choose one cloud, you'll get massive deals, like 30% discount on their direct cost, that they have to pay to the cloud. So they'll choose that one cloud as a main provider, and then try to move the services to that. And then, like you said, there are specific niche areas, right? Like machine learning, or chatbots, or contact center stuff. So those things, what they'll do is they'll sign up with the secondary cloud, GCP as an example, right? And then they will try to work on that.
Yeah.
So their effort will go into the governance of the first cloud, and then they'll try
Yes.
to learn, and then they'll try to put the same governance in the second cloud. And the, let's say, like Oracle database is another example. Then I know companies use even OCI for that matter as part of the third cloud, because for now they have to use Oracle cloud. There's no way of going to Postgres, AWS at some point, so they'll stick to that. And that's how they choose the second and third, I would say. So they'll have the primary, and then they'll have the other two sort of add-ons clouds.
Then in that case, Ranga, what do you think? Like, how hard it is for a learner to kind of quickly shift between these three clouds, right? I'm now working on Azure, and now my company decided to move to GCP. Are the skills kind of interchangeable, or the learning curve required?
Absolutely, Amit. If you look at if you when you start learning the cloud, right? One of the most important things we recommend usually is choose one of them, but spend a lot of time with it, right? It's very
Right.
important if you pick
Yep.
up a cloud to spend at least a year, a couple of years deploying. I mean, if you're a developer, deploying a lot of applications, right? If you're into DevOps, probably you do whatever you typically do in your non-cloud environment in your cloud, but do that for at least a year or two and try and learn it very, very well. And then you would see that your skills you learn in one cloud are easily transferable to the other clouds, right? Underlying each of the clouds are the same kind of services, right? You have first important ones are security networking, right? So underneath that would be compute, database, machine learning services, whatever, I mean, storage. So there are a wide variety of services, and you'd see that each of the cloud, for example, if I pick up compute, it would have a platform as a service offering where you can just deploy anything. I mean, maybe a jar file, a war file as well. Like you'll also have a container as a service offering. You'll have Kubernetes offering. So if you look at all of them, they would have very, very similar kinds of offerings. So your skills you learn in one are easily transferable, but the important thing is to spend sufficient time with it to understand the cloud in depth. If you spend sufficient time with Google Cloud, for example, or Azure, you'll understand not only Azure, but you'll also understand how cloud works. And those skills which you get understanding how the cloud works are
Right.
easily transferable across.
Right. Right. That's very important. So the skills are transferable. So that is proven. But now, Satish, if I want to say start learning one particular cloud in depth, as Ranga mentioned, as a new beginner, what is an ideal time it will require for me to kind of master that basic level of services for one particular cloud?
That's a very difficult question to answer, right? Because it depends on who the person is, what they've done before, how much experience that you have.
Yeah.
If and on what is the metric or measurement on which we say you've become an expert, you've become good. That is difficult to say because different projects are at different levels, different depths. If you just take some convenient measure, right? Let's just say certification as a measure. Just to say,
Yes.
if you pass a certification, you've got some knowledge about the subject, right? Even if you take just that as one metric that you can measure against, you will see wide variation. I have seen people who studied for like half a year and flunked one of these certifications. There are people who've cracked like 3 certifications in a week, right? And it just shows that exactly what Ranga said. If they have existing skills that are transferable, right, whether it comes from private clouds that they've worked on, whether they've worked on other public clouds, or if they even they understand software fundamentals like networking, storage, compute, all of that, right? Even if it isn't specifically on the cloud, but you've just built web applications that you have, on your own computer. Those kind of things make it very easy, right? On the other hand, yesterday I was having a conversation with a person who was trying to crack a basic certification in one cloud, but they came from a completely different background, right? And they came from not software, not programming, but they came from a, I think, HR kind of background. And they said, hey, you know what? I would like to be leading projects on Google Cloud. And that's interesting, right? There's so many people who are saying there's value here, there is good pay here, there's good remuneration. Let's go do this. And she obviously found it difficult to crack that exam on the first attempt, right? And that's the variation you would see, right? And with that, given that that is a context, I don't want to specify a number and say, here is the point at which you become an expert, right?
Correct.
In the context that you are in, if you're able to apply yourself, if you're able to get the results that you want for your customer, then you're good. In certain cases, those results might be very expansive. Like, for example, if you're trying to be an architect, you need to know 300 technologies. But maybe that's not the expectation today, right? Maybe the expectation is just to interface with the customer. Maybe an expectation on the other end is just to be able to do one part of a DevOps pipeline, right? And if you're good at that, you're already a step in. right? And then you can go from there. So, having said all that, I would say typically, right, it is in the range of uh, weeks to months. It's not going to happen a couple of days. It's not typically going to happen in a week, right? Usually, I would say many months if you are kind of starting afresh. But if you've got transferable knowledge, then it's going to be days, right? That's usually the kind of guidance that I might give.
Right, right. So if somebody is coming from a little bit of a development background, has a bit of programming knowledge, so with bit of courses around in few days, like within a month, it's possibly possible for that person to crack at least the beginner level of certification. That's what we are saying for any
Kind of,
cloud.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of like that. But even then, I would be careful about saying this, right? There might be a person, for example, who's come with programming background in one particular thing. Let's say they've done COBOL for the last 30 years, right? And they've done
yeah,
only JavaScript for the last 30 years. I mean, JavaScript has been around for 25 years, so 25 years. But it might not be skills that immediately transfer to the cloud because you need to understand a lot of other things, right? For example, if
correct.
they've never done compute storage networking, then that's a different learning path for them. So let me not give a specific answer. Let's just say each person's mileage is going to be different, but you should at
Right,
least start.
definitely. No, no doubt there. So yes, what we concluded is definitely those two clouds talk to each other. We can have kind of multi-cloud strategy, and yeah, probably anybody, even as Satish said, an HR now is getting into cloud. So man, the competition will get tougher and tougher the more time you kind of spend thinking about when is the right time. Probably the right time was yesterday, and the next right time is now, right? So that's pretty good. So now, talking about programming languages. So what sort of programming languages do I need to learn to kind of be able to program on Google Cloud? So is it a programming language or Google Cloud? What is Google Cloud like? There's some myth around, like some students have, oh, I need to learn Google Cloud programming language. It has its own command line console where I need to program. So is it true? Like GK, you are nodding your head. Probably you have
Yeah,
something to say there.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is not true that Google Cloud has their own programming language. I mean, they have Go, which is by Google, but that doesn't mean that if you know Go, Google Cloud programming language. There's no specific thing like that. Google Cloud has a utility like any other cloud. Like AWS has AWS CLI, Google Cloud has Google Cloud CLI to interface with the Google Cloud services. But that's that. If it comes to programming language, specific programming language, like I've said in my channel as well, I personally would suggest people who are, see, I think it depends on the background. So let's say you're coming from a Java background, you don't have to ditch Java completely to go to cloud, because cloud is massive and there are different streams in cloud. Like if you want to become a microservices developer for a company, and company is hiring Java developers who have cloud knowledge, meaning that the expectation is that they have to develop microservices, interact with PaaS services, and know how to interact with database services, manage services, right? So then you can become a damn good Java who can make 500K in US, and then have cloud knowledge and become a cloud developer. And so that's why I'll be very careful on telling them what specific programming language. But people who are new to the cloud, who have no programming background or no system administration sort of background, then I would tell them at least learn Python. It's easy programming language.
Yeah,
That way you can at least, when you go to the company as a system administrator or as an DevOps engineer, as an operation engineer, they would give you tasks like, hey, can you write this Terraform script, or can you write this Polomi script or whatever, and then can you write this Lambda function to clean up the resources. So at least one language that you are efficient in writing those services, or those snippets of code. So even in interviews, right, when you go for any cloud interview doesn't care whether you know Go or Python. They will just give you a code and they'll ask you to see how you can write the code, and they'll look at your logic and the way you are writing the code. So that's what I generally recommend, that if you are confused and you have no programming background, then Python is one language that I would suggest.
right. So
Just to
does
add
that?
on to, sorry,
Yes, Ranga. No, no, no.
just to add on to that, GK, right? So if you have, I mean, if you're aiming for a programming kind of a role, I think you're right. So you pick up Python and get started. Or if you already know programming and really like in specific language, those skills obviously are easily transferable. And I mean, those are the same applications you would be deploying to the cloud anyway, right? But it's also, there might be non-technical folks as well who might not even know programming. So I think they also have a role to play, and they have also, like, they don't really need to learn programming, especially if you look at project managers or business folks, right? Having a high level understanding of the cloud, like just like this Satish is giving an example of a HR who's learning to be able to lead projects on Google Cloud, right? Even for them, probably they don't need the programming experience, but they need to have a high level understanding of what the Google Cloud is, what are the different services. They will need to understand the fundamentals of the cloud as well. What is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, what is container orchestration. Probably they don't need to worry about programming, but they need to understand the fundamental concepts so that whenever there's a conversation going on in a project, they are at least able to make sense of what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. And so programming is definitely required, but more than programming, what we understand is a basic understanding of all the services of the cloud is very important. Coming
You
back
need
to
not be all the
program,
services, just to
yeah,
not to, you know,
yeah,
because
yeah,
this is
there
a
are
common
lots of
question that people
services
ask.
otherwise.
There are like what 1,000 plus services in AWS. I even don't know the count. So I don't think, like I'm telling you, like the way I have interacted with a lot of AWS guys myself, I've interacted with AWS BDs and SS whole my cloud life. So even they don't know what was the new service that AWS has launched. So it's impossible to catch up with all the services, and that's like the beauty of cloud, right? If you're a data science guy, you just have to learn 3 or 4 services. If you are a
Absolutely.
database guy, if you want to make a good database sort of a guy in cloud, you just have to learn 3 or 4 services. So cloud is huge and they're offering for everybody. That doesn't mean that you have to know everything. So it depends on the role, and then you just have to know specific services.
Correct, correct. Spot on there, GK.
Thank you.
So if I learn Python, that should be good enough. But basically, any one programming language, if I know, probably I am kind of qualified to program in cloud. Is that a fair statement to say, Satish? What do you think? Like if I
Um,
know like Node.js, for example,
yeah.
can I still work on cloud?
Yes, I do want to combine the answer with the things that GK and Ranga already said, right? First thing is
Right.
programming and development is one part of this whole story, right? Um, what we used to do as independent teams in our earlier companies today is just all brought together under the simple word called cloud, right? Under a single word called cloud, but it encompasses so much. And focusing on only on the programming language itself might be a little too narrow. And if you don't have programming background, you still need salespeople, you still need analysts, you still need people who just understand SQL, who can create visualizations, who are able to set up data centers, right? None of these require programming languages. That being said, there are a few that I typically recommend for certain kinds of workloads. Obviously, when it comes to machine learning today, you want to know understand Python, right? It is the de facto language for that. I'm a strong a proponent of Go as a programming language. It is brilliant. It is very powerful. It is very light. It is very suitable for what the cloud is, right? Unlike, say, Java or .NET, they came from different backgrounds at a time when there were independent machines, when people are on their own private data centers, when containers and Kubernetes and all wasn't there, right? And so today, I would recommend people try out Go. Brilliant language built with the cloud in mind, right? And you can see its suitability for that. And of course, when it comes to the front end, it is invariably JavaScript. And of course, that JavaScript, if you want to also keep it as a backend, you can also do Node.js. If you look at, say, even Google Cloud, right, where they offer development as a platform, whether it is Cloud Functions or App Engine, and of course, Cloud Run doesn't matter, but where the platform offers a language, all of these languages are supported. Node.js is supported, Python is supported, I think Ruby is also supported, Go is supported, Java is supported. Um, so these might be the ones that make at least the maximum impact on Google Cloud. If you want to be developing something, I don't know as much about AWS and Azure, but these would be the typical languages, right? Python, machine learning, Go for the backend. You could also do Java, .NET, and Node.js, and JavaScript itself for the front end.
Awesome, awesome. So now this leads me to my following question, as we are already talking all the good things about Google Cloud, and I really love Google Cloud. So, so first thing first is Google Cloud has support for so many languages. Other than that, what are the native benefits that Google Cloud Platform supports for which enterprises are kind of lining up to kind of move to Google Cloud today? Ranga, like what are the native benefits?
Okay, I would highlight one specific thing.
Right.
Like if you look at Google Cloud, right, there are a lot of services which were running on some kind of Google Cloud, which are very, very commonly used, like things like YouTube, for example, or Google Drive. These are some of services
Gmail.
which are exactly Gmail. These are
Yeah,
services used by Gmail, I mean, billions of users, and they are
absolutely.
already running on Google Cloud. So that's one thing which is yeah, which I think is like the scale, like it's already demonstrated with such big products, right? So that's one. And to be like thinking of workloads, right? So if you're looking at machine learning or data engineering workloads, I think Google Cloud has a big advantage there over the other clouds. I mean, all the other clouds are trying to catch up, but I would say Google Cloud is the leader out in the like data engineering and the machine learning space today.
There you go. GK, any other from the developer's point of view that you think Google Cloud is kind of superior or natively supports?
I think I agree with Ranga on that. So, two areas where a lot of companies are looking towards, especially enterprise, are looking towards Google Cloud. One is data
Right.
engineering. Hands down, BigQuery is the best. Like I would say, you know, OLAP sort of data warehousing system when compared to Redshift, I guess, or any other service. So that's, I think, even Google themselves are trying to more promote that one. And then machine learning tools, machine learning services, their new contact center service that they have launched, chatbots. I think they have superior machine learning. One, because they have huge data. Obviously, that's what people say, that and they have trained these models very well, that they work awesome out of the box. So the machine learning is one area. Data engineering as a whole is one area where Google Cloud excels when compared to others.
I can add a few. See, I would say in almost every single solution and service that is important, Google Cloud has a significant advantage, right? If not a significant advantage, there is an
Mm-hmm.
advantage that they have brought in. Even think of something like networking, right? Azure and AWS having come from ages past, they are still stuck with certain older technologies that they're not able to upgrade as quickly. Whereas Google Cloud, they've got this global VPC, for example, the kind of networking they're able to do, right, in terms of even providing a premier layer for networking, right? Very basic of what is offered. I think it's got an advantage over the other two. If you look at things like compute, right, on compute itself, the proof is in the pudding for some of these cases where companies like SAP with extremely heavy workloads are dependent on Google for some of the largest machine shapes, right? So in terms of the hardware, in terms of hardware, even for the cases where Ranga and GK mentioned about machine learning, right? They've got these what are the ones, the TPUs, right? Nobody else
Right.
has TPUs, right? So from a networking level, from an infrastructure level, even from a reliability level, right? If you look in the last few months, AWS unfortunately has had multiple downtimes, right, where entire swaths of the internet has just gone down, right? Not so much for Google, or in fact, even if it was much lesser. So in terms of the latest software, the latest underlying technologies, which are more dependable, which scale better, and of course the idea about BigQuery, machine learning, and all. Again, I can add some points to it. Say, for example, more than 50% of the research in the world, research papers that are written in and around artificial intelligence, comes from Google, right? You put all the other companies together and still less than what Google does in that area. And you can see that is also getting back into the products, right? Into all these things. When you take off things like MapReduce or BigQuery, these are technologies that came from Google with research. And nobody else offers BigQuery or a parallel to it, at least as well, right? So for all of these things, whether storage, compute, networking, machine learning, AI, all of these kind of things, Google either has a significant advantage or at least a part advantage, right? There's at least some delta that is better than all the others. And that's one of the reasons why I also choose to be on Google Cloud compared to the others.
Yeah, so just to add to one other service that a lot of companies are looking towards Google Cloud is GKE. When compared to
Yeah.
the native Kubernetes service on AWS, or I think GKE is much superior, especially with their autopilot stuff. I think that's where they're also putting a lot of efforts. I think, yeah, machine learning and GKE are two
I, I forgot
main
to
areas.
mention Kubernetes. It was on my mind, but I forgot to mention, and
Yeah,
that's
even I
very
forgot.
important too, right? Kubernetes in its earlier form has been running for more than a decade within Google before the open source. Google understands the ins and out of it, and they've by far, based on all kind, I mean, all analysts, right? Gartner, Forrester, everybody endorses Google as having the best managed solution for Kubernetes. And today, the whole container ecosystem is just taking over the world, right? It's more and more people are moving to containers, and they've extended that to make it multi-cloud, right? I don't think any of the other cloud providers has a solution like Anthos that does a software flexible way of working across all of
Absolutely.
them. So I
Right.
think Google has a significant technical advantage, um, just from the kind of research it does, and maybe also because it came later into the market, right? A little later, it was able to not have the same liabilities that some of the older, like AWS and Azure has today.
Right. And I think even for the late movers advantage, as you call, right, if there's another kind of cloud player which trying to enter late, and it is very hard for them to get the late movers advantage now, is because they don't have the deep pockets and scale that Google has,
Yeah,
probably.
I agree.
Right. So
I was
it'll be
thinking
very
about it
hard for
too.
anybody to beat them.
Yeah. Today, if you look at most of the clouds, right, the public clouds, the big company, if you see IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, and then of course Google, right? The other very big company that could have made a killing coming in late might have been what's
Apple,
Alibaba, right? The Alibaba.
Alibaba,
But
yeah.
of course, they are mired in politics, and they've got other problems because of the whole, whatever standing China has in the geopolitical arena, it is biting them, right? It's biting them, and they, even though they came in late, I wonder if they'll ever grow to be a global player like the others. So Google is in this right, nice, sweet spot at this point with respect to deep pockets, large amount of investment, large amount of research, and also being a little late, and thus not having to bear all the baggage from older technologies.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, probably it's the most sustainable cloud that we have at hand.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that too. Any topic you come up with, right? It's like almost, hey, we can point out something that says, hey, Google Cloud has this delta advantage. So pretty good for them. I'm, cool, pretty cool.
Cool. So lastly, now I just want to focus on how I want to get started. I am now super excited listening to all you three experts talk about Google Cloud. I'm super excited to start learning about Google Cloud. Where should I go? What's the first step towards learning Google Cloud? GK.
Okay. Again, it's a tough
I know
question,
you
isn't
have your YouTube channel and you have your
it?
courses.
No, so personally, if I take my experience, we were going through the Google Cloud in the company, so it was easier for me, and I already had a lot of AWS experience. So with that experience, it wasn't that difficult. So it was. So if it depends on the person. Like if that person has AWS experience or Azure experience, Google Cloud is going to be very easy. We talked about it. Everything is going to be transferable. Only thing that you have to make sure is you have to remember those services names in the exam. You'll be confused. That's the
And the
only thing.
commands.
And the commands, yeah. So that's one, but most of the people like who follow us, there are also a lot of newbies who do not have any cloud experience. So the best way for them, my advice is that you know uh, go to a specific course. Like Ranga has Udemy course, which has completely right from basics to entire thing. Or if you don't want to spend money, there are a lot of free resources where you can curate your own playlist. Like for example, you can look at the examination. I mean, like I've said, the best way to is to start with the exam, because it has a structure of learning cloud, if you are serious about cloud. And if you are just a manager in a current company, if you want to learn cloud, then you have your own time, and then you can go to a lot of sources for that. But if you are a fresh out of college, or if you are a person who is in outdated technology and who wants to upgrade themselves, then certification is the best way to start, I would suggest. So go through the certification page, pick any course that you have, either free or premium or whatever, and then create a playlist, follow that playlist, keep practicing. And every cloud these days gives you pretty much free voucher, like Google does $300, which is more than enough for you to practice for any certification. And the first thing, what my suggestion is, whenever you want to start with the course, after 2 weeks or 3 weeks after you have prepared to an extent, I would suggest just go for subscribing to the exam, or go to the site and go for registering the exam, because only then you will seriously put an effort to reach the target. Because I
Oh,
myself
tell me about it. Yeah, it's so important actually to
yeah,
kind of book the exam. Otherwise, you kind of keep pushing. You have done the course,
exactly,
you've done it twice, but you
yeah.
will not sit for the exam. That date never
Yeah.
comes.
You will initially target for 2 months or 3 months, but I'm telling you that will go to 6 months, and end of the year will come and you haven't done the certification. So it happens with everybody, it happens with us also. So that's one suggestion. And then I have talked about the courses. There is Udemy, and I also said, like, if you want to go for a premium course, I would suggest Udemy, because it's cheaper than many other courses. It's no brainer.
Absolutely.
$6,
Yeah.
$7, you'll get the whole course. Or if you want to do free, Azure has free trainings. GCP has some sort of free trainings. AWS also started free trainings. They are also very good. I mean, I have done
Yes.
my Azure fundamentals completely free, and
Oh, yeah.
obviously I had experience, so it was a little easier for me. But they also have very good structure.
Yes.
That's that. And when you do the course in a video, or when you go through Ranga's video or Satish's videos, make sure that you practice them with that credit whatever you got. Please don't just follow the video and think that I'm good with the exam. And then make sure you keep practicing tests wherever you find the one that you so before you start for the preparation, the one test that you get from GCP for any certification is that basic questions that they have in the Google
Yes.
Forms. So I would start with that personally, and then I will, even if it is wrong, I'll know at least what is the format of the exam. And that's my habit. Even before going into exams, I will have to look at what structure and some free questions that they have. And pretty much sometimes the same questions are also coming in the exam. It happened for me in the digital leader, pretty much exact question. So it's better to follow that, and then that's, yeah, that's good enough to learn cloud.
Perfect. Perfect. Satish, what do you think? Anything additional that the learners can focus on?
I was thinking of a couple of things, but then when GK said something, I just want to maybe second that, because that's an important point. The idea of focusing maybe on a certification. Now, I know it might look like bias because most of my videos are about certification, but do remember, I'm not trying to sell you that. They're just free, videos on YouTube. You can go watch that.
Yes.
But focusing on a certification is useful because it sets a certain boundary on what you want to learn. Today, like GK and the others said, Ranga and all said, right? Google Cloud has about 200, 250 services. What are you going to pick up? Are you going to be a developer? Are you going to be DevOps, machine learning? Where do you start? Where do you end? Right? It's a rabbit hole that will not end, and therefore focusing on a certification sets a certain boundary and limit that can give you a certain focus, right? Otherwise it's like saying,
Right.
hey, I'm going to trek the Himalayas, or I'm going to hike the Grand Canyon. It's just too much, right? Where are you going to start, where are you going to end? But if you maybe focus on, even if it's a big task, say I'm just going to I'm just going to climb Mount Everest. It's one focus thing that you're looking at, right? And you're not spreading
Right.
yourself too thin.
Yeah.
Even on one topic, though, you could be a focused expert that takes you, that you might have to spend months and years to learn. So, combining with another thing that Ranga said earlier, right? Start somewhere. Doesn't matter what, right? Doesn't matter which cloud. But if you can start somewhere, focus on maybe the certification, say the associate, or if you come from a data background, maybe the professional data engineer. It gives you direction, and it also kind of gives you a fairly horizontal view of what all is necessary with one particular area that you need to focus on. In addition to that, I would also strongly recommend Quick Labs. It's brilliant, right? Quick Labs is
Absolutely.
absolutely brilliant because, again, it just gives you focused exercises. because a lot of times the problem with the cloud is you're not writing small programs, right? You need many things to be put together before you can actually do something. And somebody's already created that guidance for you, right? On the other hand, like if you're trying to appear for an exam, you say just go do a program on lead code and keep doing that over and over again, right? So this is Quick Labs is kind of like the lead code for Google Cloud and some of the other things, and it gives you a certain focus that you can use, right? Given the time, I'll stop with those two, and I will have somebody else have the floor.
Okay. Satish, I mean, to add to what Satish and GK are saying, right, in terms of the importance of certifications, I hated certifications, right? I did my Java certification. I felt this does not tell me whether I'm a good Java programmer or not. If I'm a Java programmer, I have to focus on object-oriented programming, like good low-level design. And then probably after a little while, after practicing design, that's when I can call myself a Java programmer. A Java certification tests you on a few trivial things, which does not make anybody a good Java programmer. So after doing that certification, I really hated it. But as Satish was saying, even if you work for a few years in the cloud, you might only be an expert on a few specific narrow areas of the cloud, and there is no way you have a big picture around what else is present in the cloud. Right? So that's where I think certifications in the cloud have a big role to play, where you get an overview of everything. Probably you don't need to know everything about everything, right? It's like I would say more like a T-shaped thing, right? It's like we will usually in DevOps we say T-shaped. I think it's the same thing when it goes to the cloud as well. It's T-shaped. You can never know everything about every service which is present on there. So you would start with something and you'd go like you get a broad overview, and probably depending on your role, you get into whatever you'd want. Second is I think a year back, Google did not have anything that was a good starting point for somebody who's non-technical, right? So now in the last year, Google has introduced the Google Cloud Digital Leader Certification, which I think is a nice entry point for people who don't have any experience with the cloud, irrespective of whether they are developers or anything. If they don't have any experience with cloud or any of the other cloud platforms, I think Google Cloud Digital Leader is a very nice starting point. So that earlier the big step, like earlier the first certification, if I have to do a cloud engineer, it was a big step up if you are not a programmer, right? It's like, I mean, even the architect is somewhere else. So I feel the Google Cloud Digital Leader kind of fits in right in the mix. And I think that's a good starting point if you don't have any experience with the cloud, right? If you have specific experience on anything, like if you're a programmer or if you are a data engineer or if you have a machine, I mean, if you are good at machine learning, probably there are specific certification, role specific certifications out there which you can try and get started with. And I second on the Satish point that Quick Labs, I think Quick Labs is definitely something you would want to give a try. It's lovely. I mean, the experience that it provides of learning something, I don't think even a lot of courses can provide you with. And last thing about free courses, I think Coursera or like Google offers a lot of courses on Coursera, which are absolutely awesome. I mean, if you want to
Absolutely.
go
Yeah.
deep into any of these technologies, then go to Coursera. I mean, you like at the top they might look like a paid course, but if you go into the minor details, you can actually do the video part of it for free. So go ahead and do them. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
those would be the important points.
Absolutely. And like Google is actually committed to kind of train more than 40 million people in the Google Cloud skills, and they have like more than 700 free kind of hands-on lab there. So do keep checking the Google kind of LinkedIn page from time to time. They roll out that 1 month free kind of offer where they have all the trainings kind of open for public, because their goal as an organization is to have 40 million people kind of trained in Google Cloud. So with that, I would like to say very much thanks to Satish, GK, and Ranga for their time. And yeah, one final kind of closing comment if Ranga, Satish, and GK you want to make before we wrap this up.
Satish, do you want to start?
I don't have. I think one of the things. First, I'm glad that you guys are doing this, and I think there are a few more things like this planned. And there were really interesting points that came from these discussions. So I would just say, come back to these. If this is interesting, if this is valuable, and I think we'll
Yeah,
get deeper into some of these topics in later weeks,
Yeah.
which could be interesting. And of course, give us feedback, have conversations around this. Connect with us on LinkedIn or on the other places that we are, and I think we can all contribute to making cloud a great landing place for everybody.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, like a lot of people are in the analysis paralysis mode. You know, they are just thinking about where to start and what to start. Just subscribe. If you are struggling to pick something, just go to the google.console.com or console.google.com rather, and just get
Exactly.
$300 credit and create your first VM. That's where you're going to start your life. Create your first VM and try to do SSH to that VM. If you're to that extent, then you'll figure out rest of the things, and slowly you will get into that mode of learning cloud. Yeah, so my suggestion is do that, and then just have small targets every day. First day I'll create a VM, second day I'll create a cloud function, third
Yeah.
day I'll do something else. Have those small wins that will give you a sense of satisfaction, and like it will encourage you to learn more in cloud. So start right
Absolutely.
away. That's what my suggestion
Building
is.
basically atomic habits, right? Doing small,
Yeah,
small things.
exactly. Right.
Cool. And I think Satish and GK covered most of the things I wanted to say. So
Yeah.
I'll add links to Satish and GK's LinkedIn profiles and YouTube channels in the description. So
Yeah.
do actually follow them on LinkedIn. Like Satish and GK keep posting a lot of updates on Google Cloud. So do follow them to know how to get started with Google Cloud and stuff. There is a lot of free content they offer as well. So do check them out. And thanks a lot, GK, Satish, and Amit, for the
Thank you.
time. Really, really happy to have this conversation with people who already have done this in the last few years, right? We have been using Google Cloud for a long time, and I think it would
Yeah.
be very, very useful for everybody who's hearing out there. And if you have any questions or anything that you think we have to cover, please do put them in the comments so that we can
Yeah.
take that as feedback and we can discuss that in the subsequent weeks as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Yep. Thank you
you.
for having us. Thanks.
Thank you.